the ruins of a fallen city, betrayed by her own people, broken and alone, until the very monster she was raised to fear became her only hope for survival. What begins as a desperate rescue turns into a heart-pounding fight for truth, trust, and survival in a world where enemies aren't always who they seem. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a little love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable story. The sky above the ruined city glowed with a dull, smoky orange, heavy with ash and silence. Once this place had been proud, a shining alien capital filled with towering spires and humming lights. Now those spires were broken, jagged like teeth, reaching toward the heavens as if begging for mercy. Fires still burned in the distance, lighting up the scattered ruins like dying stars. The wind carried the bitter smell of metal, smoke, and something worse, blood. Beneath a collapsed tower, Princess Kayla Vine lay trapped, her breath shallow, her body bruised and battered. Her right arm was bent in a way it should never have, been swollen and purple beneath her cracked silver-blue armor. Her legs were pinned beneath fallen debris, and every attempt to move sent sharp waves of pain up her spine. Her lips were chapped, her face smudged with ash, and her voice was raw from screaming into the silent wreckage. Her own soldiers had left her behind. In the chaos of the retreat, they'd assumed she was dead. They didn't even check. She had cried out for them to stop, to turn around. But their footsteps had vanished, swallowed by the roar of war. Now, she was alone. Or so she thought. Footsteps echoed across the rubble, slow, heavy, deliberate. Kayla's heart leapt. Maybe it was one of her people, a rescue team, someone to dig her out. But when the figure stepped into the faint light, her blood turned to ice. It wasn't a rescuer. It was a human. He was tall, broad, dressed in black armor that was scratched and dented like it had seen one too many battles. A gun rested on his back and a battered helmet dangled from his belt. His face was marked by old scars, his jaw hard, his eyes dark and focused. There was no pity in his expression, only purpose. This was the face of someone who'd seen too much. Kayla's fingers twitched toward the small blade on her hip, but it was hopeless. Her body wouldn't obey her, and the pain was too much. Still, she snarled through gritted teeth. "Stay away from me, human." The man didn't flinch. He knelt beside her and looked over her injuries without a word. His hands were rough and calloused, but surprisingly gentle as he brushed dust off her cracked armor. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Could have been worse." Kayla's eyes narrowed. "Don't touch me." He ignored her. His fingers reached for her arm, gently pressing around the break. She cried out and pulled back as much as she could, but she was trapped, pinned, and helpless. "It's broken," he said plainly. "I know that," she snapped. He sighed, glancing around at the rubble. No supplies, no medkit, no proper tools, only one option. She stared at him, confused. Then her heart sank as she realized what he meant. "No," she whispered, eyes wide. "You can't." "I have to set it by hand," he said, calm as stone. "Unless you want to lose the arm, or die here." Kayla's pride screamed inside her chest. She was a princess, a leader of her people. She couldn't let a human, one of the so-called monsters, lay hands on her, let alone touch her like this. But her options were gone, buried under the same rubble that trapped her body. She swallowed hard, then gave the smallest of nods. The human tore a strip of cloth from his belt and held it out. "Bite down." She glared at him but took it. As soon as it was in her mouth, he acted. Without hesitation, he grabbed her broken arm and pulled. A white-hot explosion of pain shot through her body. Her scream was muffled by the cloth, her body arching against the rubble in pure agony. Tears filled her eyes, blurring her vision. She hated him in that moment. She hated the pain. She hated being helpless. He held her arm firmly, wrapping it quickly with another piece of cloth, creating a rough splint. Then he leaned back, breathing hard, not from effort, but from concentration. She gasped, catching her breath. "You monster!" She spat, her voice hoarse. You did that on purpose. He glanced at her, a hint of a smirk tugging at his mouth. If I wanted to hurt you, Princess, you'd know. She glared, cheeks burning. She hated him. Or maybe she hated needing him. There was a difference, but not one she was ready to admit. He looked around again, scanning the shadows. We need to move, now. She blinked at him. Move? I can't even stand. You're loud, and loud attracts the wrong kind of attention. Something about the way he said it made her skin crawl. She knew what he meant. This battlefield wasn't just filled with enemies. It was filled with things that hunted the wounded. Machines, drones, predators, things that didn't care which side you were on. He stood and held out a hand. Come on, you're not dead, yet. For a long moment she stared at his hand. Every part of her body wanted to slap it away. Every part of her pride screamed to refuse. But pride wouldn't keep her alive. So slowly, painfully, she reached out and took it. He pulled her up like she weighed nothing. As they limped into the shadows of the ruined city, Kayla cast one last look behind her, at the place where she had almost died. She still didn't trust him, but she wasn't dead, and for now, that had to be enough. Dust swirled around them as Riven led Kayla through the wreckage of the ruined city. Each step crunched over broken glass, twisted metal, and fragments of a world that no longer existed. Kayla's arm throbbed, inside the crude splint he had wrapped for her. Her feet ached, her lungs burned from the smoke in the air, but she followed him, jaw tight, refusing to show weakness. She didn't like being helped, especially not by a human. Still, the truth was clear. Without Riven, she wouldn't have made it out of that rubble alive. The city was like a skeleton, hollow and eerie. Blackened buildings leaned over the streets like tired giants. Fires flickered in corners where fuel still burned, and strange shadows danced along the cracked walls. Somewhere behind them, machines moved. Kayla couldn't hear them yet, but she could feel them. The battlefield had a pulse, and it told her danger was never far behind. Slow down, she said, breath catching in her throat. I'm not a machine. Riven didn't turn around. If I slow down, we die. His voice wasn't cruel, just factual. That somehow made it worse. Kayla scowled but kept moving. Her pride screamed at her, but her legs begged her not to stop. Each step sent pain shooting through her broken arm. Every breath felt heavier than the last. Yet she kept going, matching his pace as best as she could. She didn't want him to think she couldn't keep up. They reached what was once a plaza, now a maze of broken statues and half-destroyed vehicles. Riven paused and crouched, scanning the area. Kayla followed his gaze and noticed something strange. Lines in the dust. Soft indentations like something had moved through recently. Drones, he muttered. Kayla's stomach dropped. Her people had built those machines to hunt and destroy. They didn't aim at the strong. They targeted the fallen, the ones too slow to escape. The weak, like her. She moved closer to Riven, lowering her voice. How many? He didn't answer. Instead, his hand shot out, grabbing her and pulling her behind a pile of broken stone. She almost screamed but stopped when she heard the sound. A low hum, a mechanical click. Then a red light swept across the plaza. A drone. It floated slowly, scanning, pausing every few seconds. Its movement was deliberate, cold, efficient. Kayla held her breath, her body frozen. Riven pressed a finger to his lips, eyes locked on the machine. She nodded once. She wasn't stupid. She knew what would happen if it saw them. The red light moved closer. Kayla clenched her jaw, heart pounding. Then, her foot slipped. A small rock shifted under her boot and tumbled away, bouncing once on the broken ground. The drone's red eye snapped toward them. Riven didn't hesitate. He shoved Kayla deeper into the ruins and pulled his weapon in one fluid motion. A single shot echoed through the air and the drone exploded in a burst of metal and sparks. For a second there was silence. Then, more clicking. They heard that, Riven said, grabbing Kayla's wrist. We run now. They took off through the ruins, the sound of more drones rising behind them. Kayla stumbled, barely keeping her balance. Her broken arm screamed in protest. I can't. You will, Riven said sharply. They sprinted through the ruins, weaving between walls and ducking under fallen beams. Drones buzzed in the distance, growing louder, closer. Kayla's legs burned, but she refused to stop. She wouldn't be a burden. She wouldn't beg him to carry her. Riven led her down a narrow alley and pulled her behind a broken support beam. A squad of drones zipped past the street behind them, scanning with glowing red lights. Kayla pressed her back against the wall, chest heaving. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Riven didn't move. His body was still, his weapon ready, eyes scanning the path ahead. He looked like he belonged here, in the chaos, in the ruins. Like this world was part of him. Then, without a word, he picked up a metal rod from the ground and tossed it down the far street. The sound echoed like thunder. The drones turned immediately and followed the noise. Riven exhaled slowly. That bought us a little time. Kayla glared at him. That was reckless. He gave her a sideways glance. You're welcome, princess. Don't call me that, she snapped. Riven just smirked and wiped sweat from his brow. You're fun. When you're angry? Kayla looked down at her arm. It was swollen and sore, wrapped tightly in the splint he had made. It wasn't perfect, but it had kept her going. She hated this. She hated being hurt, hated relying on someone else, especially someone like him. We should keep moving, Riven said, standing up. Kayla frowned. Where are we going? He looked, out at the ruins. Somewhere safer than here. I still don't trust you, she muttered. He nodded. Good. That means you're smart. They continued walking, more slowly now. The sun had nearly set, casting the ruins in deep shadows. Kayla walked behind Riven, watching him. He didn't speak, but he glanced back every few steps, checking if she was still with him. He never offered help, never asked if she was okay. Somehow that made her want to keep going more. He expected her to survive, so she would. For a moment, the only sounds were their footsteps and the quiet moan of the wind through the ruins. And then, far off, something moved in the dark. Not a drone. Not a person. Something else. Something alive. Riven stopped walking. Kayla felt it too, that chill in the air, the silence that felt too deep, like the city was holding its breath. What is it? She whispered. Riven didn't answer. He just looked into the darkness, face grim. Kayla followed his gaze, and in the distance, glowing eyes blinked back. The tunnel was narrow and damp, carved long ago beneath the city streets. It was dark, lit only by the faint glow of moss that clung to the stone walls. Kayla followed closely behind Riven, her injured arm aching with every step. Her breath came hard and fast, not from the run, but from fear. She kept thinking about the creature with too many eyes that had chased them, its claws scratching at the tunnel entrance as Riven slammed the hatch shut. She could still feel it watching, even now. Riven moved ahead in silence, his steps quiet, careful. He carried his rifle close, his eyes scanning the darkness like he expected another attack. Kayla wanted to ask what it was. What kind of monster could move like that, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she said the only thing on her mind. You knew about them. He didn't turn around. Yes. You saw them before, and didn't tell me. He finally stopped and looked back, his face shadowed in the dim light. Would it have changed anything? Kayla stared at him, mouth slightly open. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to tell him that knowing would have helped her prepare, that she would have fought harder, run faster. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wouldn't have helped. It would have only made her more afraid. She looked away. You still should have told me. Riven said nothing. He turned and kept walking. They walked in silence for a while, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. The air smelled of dust and rust. Strange marks lined the tunnel walls, symbols etched into the stone long ago, Kayla reached out and brushed her fingers across one. It was familiar, something she had studied during her royal lessons. These tunnels were part of the old emergency system, used during the early years of the war for evacuations and supply routes. They hadn't been touched in decades. She paused, staring at the wall. "We're in the old transport system." Riven nodded. "Still works more or less. Safer than the surface." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Not really," he replied. A sound broke the quiet, soft, steady beeping. Kayla turned her head, her heart skipping a beat. She knew that. It was a locator beacon. Her people had found her. Blue light flickered ahead in the tunnel, and then voices echoed, distant but familiar. She stepped forward quickly. "It's them. My people. They found me." Riven didn't move. He stood just out of the light, back in the shadows, eyes unreadable. He didn't say a word. 3 figures appeared from the end of the tunnel, tall and straight in polished silver-blue armor. Kayla's chest tightened. Soldiers of the Royal Guard. The one in front, Commander Selric Dane, met her gaze. His voice was calm but cold. "Princess Kayla, you're alive." Yes," she said, suddenly unsure. "We received the signal." Selric continued. "We came to retrieve you." Kayla hesitated, then turned slightly toward Riven. He hadn't stepped forward. He was watching quietly, as if waiting for something. Selric followed her gaze, and his eyes narrowed. "There's a human with you," he said flatly. Kayla nodded slowly. "He helped me." Selric's face didn't change. "Where is he now?" "Right," she began, but she didn't finish. Selric lifted a device from his wrist and pressed a button. A red pulse of light burst through the tunnel. Kayla's blood turned cold. It was a kill command. Before she could speak, Riven yanked her backward, shoving her behind a broken pipe just as plasma fire roared through the tunnel. Sparks flew, stone shattered. The soldiers weren't here to rescue her. They were here to erase the problem. And Riven, the human who had saved her life, was that problem. "They're shooting at us," she gasped. "No," Riven replied, his voice flat. "They're shooting at me." Kayla peeked over the rubble. The soldiers were moving forward, calm and steady. There was no panic, no hesitation. This wasn't a rescue. It was an execution. "Stop," she shouted, standing. "He saved me." Selric didn't pause. "That doesn't matter." She couldn't breathe. Her chest felt tight. Everything she had believed was cracking apart. "I can talk to them," she whispered, turning to Riven. "I can fix this." Riven gave her a hard look. "Can you?" She hesitated. The answer should have been yes. But the way Selric looked at her, the way he had ordered the attack without blinking, told her the truth. She wasn't a person to them. She was a symbol, a mistake that needed correcting. And Riven was a loose end. The soldiers advanced. Riven pulled a grenade from his belt. "Stay low." "What are you?" "Trust me." He threw it. The explosion rocked the tunnel, shaking the ground and throwing up clouds of dust. Kayla coughed, stumbling through the smoke. Riven grabbed her wrist and pulled her through the chaos, away from the fire and the betrayal. They didn't stop running until the tunnel twisted away from the blast site, the noise fading behind them. Kayla leaned against the wall, gasping. For breath, heart racing. She turned to Riven, eyes wide. "They were going to kill you." "They were going to kill us," he corrected. She nodded, slowly understanding. Her own people, her own commander, had chosen silence over truth, had chosen to erase what didn't fit their perfect story. Riven looked at her, his face softer. "Now, you okay?" She didn't answer. She just looked back the way they had come, where her people had stood without mercy. No, she wasn't okay. But she knew who she trusted now. And it wasn't them. The tunnel ahead was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't bring peace. It brought dread. Kayla moved behind Riven, her footsteps slow but steady. Her injured arm was still wrapped in the makeshift splint, throbbing with every motion. Her heart pounded in her chest, not just from pain or fear, but from the weight of what had just happened. Her own people had tried to kill the man who saved her. They had turned on her without hesitation. That kind of betrayal didn't fade quickly. It stuck like a bruise on the inside, deeper than any wound. Riven didn't speak as they walked. His eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, his rifle close to his chest. He wasn't limping, but he was tired. She could see it in his shoulders. Still, he moved forward like nothing else mattered. He was used to this. Used to being hunted, abandoned, and surviving anyway. They found a large chamber deep within the tunnel network, where the walls opened into a forgotten control room. Broken screens lined the walls. Rusted wires hung from the ceiling. A few old crates were pushed into corners, and there was even a small generator humming softly in the back. Riven checked the perimeter, then nodded. "We'll rest here, just for a bit." Kayla didn't argue. She sat down against the wall, wincing as her body finally gave in to exhaustion. Her legs ached, her back hurt, and her thoughts spun wildly. She glanced at Riven. He was crouched near a crate checking his ammo. She didn't even want to think about how many rounds they had left. For a long time, neither of them said anything. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Full of things they hadn't said yet. Finally, Kayla broke it. "Back there," she said quietly. "You didn't hesitate. When they fired at you." "I've seen that look before," Riven replied, not looking up. "I knew what was coming. They didn't even ask." She said, voice barely a whisper. "Didn't even wait to see if I was okay." "They didn't care," he said. She looked down. "No, they didn't." He finally turned toward her. His face was tired, but his eyes were still sharp. "You know what they're afraid of?" Kayla frowned. "What?" "The truth. That maybe the monsters they warned you about aren't the ones wearing the wrong armor." She didn't answer right away, because deep down she knew he was right. The quiet didn't last long. A sound echoed through the chamber, low and strange, like claws scraping on metal. Kayla stood quickly, her heart jumping. Riven was already, moving, weapon raised, eyes alert. Another sound, closer this time. Not machines, not drones. The creatures they had followed. Riven moved toward the only door they hadn't blocked. "There's a tunnel that leads out. Maybe to the old subway line. We need to go. Now." Kayla didn't wait for an explanation. She grabbed her pack and followed. As they rushed into the next tunnel, the sound grew louder. The creatures weren't just following. They were hunting. The air grew colder, damper. Every step echoed in the tight space. Then they saw it. A mass of shadows ahead, crawling across the walls and ceiling. The thing had too many legs, too many eyes. It moved like liquid, fast and wrong. More followed. A swarm. Riven stopped. "We won't outrun them." "What do we do?" Kayla asked, voice shaking. He looked at her for a long moment, then handed her a small metal disc. "Take this, it's a beacon, it'll lead you to the surface. Set it and run, don't stop." She stared at him. "What are you doing?" He turned back to the tunnel. "Buying you time." "No," she said, stepping forward. "I'm not leaving you." Riven gave her a small, tired smile. "You already did that once. This time don't look back." Before she could argue, he stepped forward and opened fire. The tunnel lit up with flashes of light as bullets tore into the swarm. Screeches filled the air. Kayla hesitated for a second too long, then turned and ran. She wanted to scream, wanted to go back, but her feet kept moving. She had to believe he'd make it out. The beacon pulsed in her hand. She followed its light through twisting tunnels, past collapsed walls and rusted doors. Finally, she found an exit, a narrow shaft leading upward. She climbed, her body trembling with effort, until she broke through to the surface. The night, air hit her face like a wave. The city above was still broken, still burning, but she could see the stars. For the first time in days, she felt fresh air fill her lungs. She turned, expecting to see Riven behind her, but he wasn't there. Minutes passed, then more. She collapsed to her knees, staring at the hole she'd climbed through. Then footsteps. She looked up, barely daring to hope. Riven appeared, bruised and limping, but alive. He dropped to the ground beside her, breathing hard. "You didn't run far," he said. "You didn't die," she replied. They sat there in silence again, this time not afraid of it. In the distance, lights moved. Not enemy soldiers, not drones, rescuers. But this time, Kayla didn't stand up to meet them. She stayed by Riven's side, because this time, she wasn't going back to the life that had abandoned her. Not without him, and not without the truth.